Hello and welcome back to Hilltop Stovetop, the show where we're teaching you how to make great meals in an ordinary kitchen. Today we're getting back into some desserts and we're going to be making bread pudding. This is a super easy dessert. It's been around for a long time because it's one of those family classics again, and it's again very cheap to make, but you can make it as fancy as you want as well. Basically what it is taking some stale bread, which we have here. This is a couple of French loaves, baguettes, that I've cut into good-sized chunks, about 1-inch chunks, and just left it to dry. So it's quite hard. This doesn't work if you've got fresh bread, and while it will work with sliced processed bread, it really is better with chunkier breads and breads with a lot less preservatives in them. And it's also a great way to use up leftovers. I actually do have in here, there was one leftover cinnamon bun that was getting kind of dry, so I've cut that up and added to it. One of the best bread puddings I ever made was one where I had a bunch of day-old danishes and croissants and things like that. But basically bread that is kind of dried. And we're going to make this as if it is the world's best baked French toast, but make it into a dessert. So we start off, we've got a baking pan. I've got my oven preheated to 350 degrees. And I have this bread, which I have already pre-measured, so I know it's going to fit into that pan. So first and foremost, very important that we grease our pan, because we don't want this sticking and wasting anything to this. So I'm just using a little bit of olive oil. Doesn't matter if you want to use butter or non-stick spray, whatever you have that works. Just make sure it's really well coated. Go. Then we'll take our bread and dump it in there. So you can hear how crunchy that is just based on the clattering it makes when it goes into the pan. All right. Now we've got a nice little mixing bowl here. And what we're doing is we're going to make kind of a custard. So I've got 4 cups of milk. And I've got 4 eggs. And we'll start by mixing that together just the same as we would if we were making French toast. And then we're going to add a few other things to it. Now we're going to add some brown sugar here. I've got just 1 cup of brown sugar here. I've seen recipes for this where they use as much as 2 cups of white sugar. Personally, I don't like mine that sickly sweet, so 1 cup for this would be about right in my estimation. And then I've got a tablespoon of cinnamon. And I've got about 3 tablespoons of melted butter. Now, the one thing I have to watch for is this brown sugar that I put in there was a little bit on the lumpy side. So if you get a lump like that, just make sure that it's properly broken up. All right, and then this is optional, but I'm adding about 1/3 cup of white rum into this. The rum is totally optional. Some people might prefer to use bourbon or some other kind of liquor, or no liquor at all. If you're not using any liquor at all, I would suggest putting a little bit of vanilla into this, just as an added flavoring. And then the last thing I have for the pudding itself is some raisins. And again, this is optional. There's some people that prefer to not put raisins in there, so I kind of like them. So I've taken a cup of raisins, and in this case I covered them with boiling water to start with, just so that they would plump up a little bit. If you've got a fresh batch of raisins, you don't have to worry about that part. But we're just going to sprinkle that in amongst our bread. Like I say, I do know lots of people that don't like raisins, so this part is optional. And then we're taking our milk and egg mixture and just pouring that over the top. And what you're going to see is the bread is actually, because it's so dry, it's actually floating a little bit. So what I'm going to do here, see how it floats? So we're going to make sure that everything is well coated. And then I'm just going to let it sit for about 10 minutes or so before we put it in the oven, so that we've got a chance for everything to be absorbed and we don't have any dry pieces sticking up on the top. Okay, so there, we've got everything at least dampened on the outside. We'll leave this for about 10 minutes and we'll be right back. All right, so we've let this sit for 15-20 minutes or so. I keep checking it with a fork, and I did turn the pieces a little bit to make sure that they were being well coated. So even though they're very firm still, you can tell that it's easier to get the fork into them. So we're going to end up still with something that you can distinguish what the pieces are, but it will still be nice and moist in the middle. So one thing I wanted to mention was that, like I said, that I put in a little less sugar than some people do. But keep in mind that this is an option that if you could do this without putting in the sugar and the raisins, and maybe add some bacon bits and cheese and have it as a breakfast bread pudding. Just all kinds of things to your own taste, but it's a good way to use up some bread, kind of like I said, making French toast, but with some variations to this. We could have also added a little bit of maple syrup to this if we wanted that take on it. But I think we're ready to pop this in the oven now. We already have our oven preheated to 350 degrees. So we're going to pop this in for about 35 minutes. At about the 20-minute mark of that, we're going to start making the sauce that goes with this. Again, the sauce is optional. In our family, when we used to make this, we would just put straight cream on it. There wasn't any fancy sauces, but I'm going to do a little bit of a sauce to go with this. So we'll pop it in the oven, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, so we're at about the 20-25 minute mark now. As is usual, I said it takes 35 to 40 minutes to cook this thing, so at the 35-minute mark, our timers are going to go off. We'll just have a quick look in the oven to see how it's coming along. It will be done when the edges are crispy and starting to come away from the edges of the pan a little bit. But in the meantime, we're going to start making our sauce. And I've got my stove on here, just a medium-low heat. I don't want it too hot, because if we have it too hot, this particular sauce might have a chance to curdle. So we got a little over half a cup of butter there that we're going to melt in. And I'm adding about 3/4 cup of brown sugar to melt into this as well. So that's a starting point. And again, we had this brown sugar that we have to break up the bits a little bit, and that'll be easier as the butter melts as well. It will moisten that up. Ah, delicious already. And then I have an egg here that I've whisked up a little bit. Whoop. And as soon as I've got this moistened, I'm going to add that in as well. There we go. I'm going to add this in before it gets too hot, because if it was too hot and we added that egg, the egg would cook right away, so it wouldn't mix in well to help it thicken. Okay. Oh, that's a 5-minute timer, so that means we've got about 10 minutes more to go. Now I've got about half a cup of rum here. Depending on what you would put into the bread pudding, you'll want to continue that theme on in the sauce. If you were using bourbon, you'd put bourbon in your sauce. If you weren't using any alcohol at all, just put a little bit of vanilla in for the flavoring. But we're going to add this in, and we're going to add it in slowly, and again before the sauce gets too hot, because we don't want anything curdling on us. And we're just going to keep stirring. And when you use alcohol like this, the process of cooking it actually burns off the actual alcohol, and that just leaves you with the flavor. All right, and then I also have some whipping cream here. So that's the full fat cream, and we're going to add in, a cup or so of that. Now we're just going to keep stirring. And I'm going to take out a little spoon here, and I'm just going to have a quick taste. Oh, that is going to be so awesome. Okay, so it's not hot yet. As it heats up, that egg will thicken it a little bit. But it's very caramely. And I've been stirring this sauce for the last 10 minutes or so. So I think we're about done here. And we'll just pour that into, so you can see it's nice, thick, kind of a gravy consistency. So there's our sauce. Now, when we take this pudding out of the oven, and I will admit I did take a little peek, you can tell that the moisture has all absorbed up into that. There it is, folks. And if you look, I don't know if we can get kind of a close-up here, down along the edge here, you can see how the moisture is all absorbed. Now it's started to peel away here. It's thickened up in the middle. And even if we let it sit for a little bit more, that will continue to absorb. But I think that we're about ready to serve this up. So I've chosen to put it onto a plate. It could go into a bowl, depends on your taste and your china. And again, this is really important how we initially had this well greased to start with. And our bread has held its shape even as it absorbed all of that egg and milk mixture. And then we're going to take some of our sauce and drizzle it over the top. Like I said, in our family it was If you don't want it this sweet, although this is more creamy than it is sweet, it's kind of a gentle caramel flavor, but you could just use plain cream if you wished. So we hope that you enjoyed today's episode of Hilltop Stovetop and making of bread pudding. And keep in mind that there's lots of variations that you can do on this, but the concept is the same, just using up some leftover bread. So hopefully you'll like and subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you in our next episodes. Bye-bye for now.